Will gather Friday to commemorate the centennial of the mass killings of Armenians during World War I. More than 20 countries, as well as the European Parliament, have formally recognized the deaths of up to 1.5 million Armenians as an act of genocide. Turkey's leadership rejects that description, arguing it was a war with casualties on both sides. Joining us now is Tülin Daloğlu. She's a journalist and opinion writer based in Ankara, Turkey. Also with us from the state of Utah here in the United States is Buenos. He's a doctoral candidate in political science at the University of Utah and has studied the Turkey-Armenian conflict extensively. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Buenos, let me start with you. As I just mentioned, you've studied this conflict extensively. Do you believe it should be called a genocide?
I believe that the term genocide is a legal characterization, and I look at this use of the term from a political standpoint. Your viewers ought to know that the term genocide was never applied in a legal manner to what happened in 1915. And so the reference to genocide, in my view, is purely political.
Tülin, how will Turkey commemorate what happened in 1915? There was so much reported on the deaths of up to 1.5 million Armenians, as we know, but what were the losses for the Turkish people?
Well, from the reference of the Turkish people, you know, it's not only about the Armenian people. We're also talking about the time of the First World War, which brought the end of the Ottoman Empire, much like plucking a chicken off its feathers. So from the Turkish perspective, that defeat was heavy. The trauma went deep. Millions lost their lives regardless of their ethnic and religious background. So from the Turkish perspective, when they look back, they do not only recall the Armenian suffering, but they, remember that huge defeat that Ottomans faced and that eventually brought the, foundation of the Turkish Republic.
And Tülin, what do you make of this raging debate over the terminology, the use of the word genocide? Because, I mean, as Tal pointed out, there are legal implications here, but is there too much emphasis being placed on the use of that word? Look, it was a tragedy of huge proportions nonetheless.
Right. When you look at the Turkish narrative, you do see that there is a lot of emphasis of the Armenian revolutionary committees cooperating with the Russians, conducting a very violent insurgency that, created a trouble for the Ottoman army. And so this is a real problem from the Turkish perspective. And so when they look at it, they see that the Armenians betrayed the Ottomans. And so from that perspective, they see that the Armenians are also, they do also carry a responsibility in it. But, when you look at it, proportionality in response to such security threats, even at times of war, should count. So when I look at it, I personally think that there is, it can be called genocide, but I'm not a legal expert, so I do not want to put my focus on how do we, word what had happened in 1915. But what is important to me is how do we reach out to people who are mourning? How do we reach out to people who are stuck in their traumas and cannot get over losing their loved ones? What do we do for them? And in doing so, it is unfortunate that Turkey built an image, a self-image of reacting to one single word. In return, we, played down our humanity. And that's not the true image of the Anatolian people of this beautiful land. And that is the continuing tragedy of our times.
Tal, last year, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan offered his condolences to the grandchildren of Armenians who were killed by Ottoman soldiers. It was considered at that time a very historic step. But this year we're hearing a little bit of a change in tone, a little bit of a change in emotion. To what do you attribute that?
Well, I'll start by saying that offering condolences seems to be the most that Turkey can do right now, considering that there's no partner for reconciliation on the Armenian side. It seems offering these condolences was a unilateral act, and it seems that all suggestions and invitations of a bilateral nature were rejected. And so that's why we should consider these condolences to be, sincere and the most that Turkey can do at this point. But I want to add to what Tülin said about the Turkish perspective. I actually would like to talk a little bit about the academic perspective. We often hear mention of 1.5 million Armenians, but there's been a lot of differing views on the number of Armenians casualties that suffered from this tragedy. Even Richard Hovhannissian, who's one of the main original agents of the genocide accusation against Turkey, changed his mind on the number, the estimation of the number. So that's one thing to have in perspective. Another thing is, once we realize that there's a difference between the genocide scholarship and the scholarship produced by Ottomanists, produced by historians who are skilled at studying the history of the Ottoman Empire, you see different narratives, you see different discourse. The most famous among the Ottomanists is probably Bernard Lewis, and to him this was a struggle between two nations over territory without mention of the term genocide. If you look closely at the work of the genocide scholarship, you'll see that it is largely American influenced, and that it is catering to certain political advantages over Turkey to use as leverage against Turkey. And it is effective, being that we're having these discussions here today, and we're not talking about any other cases of massacres in the 20th century or the 19th century.
Tülin, now we have the Pope who's weighed in on this debate. He's called it the first genocide of the 20th century. I mean, is that helpful when we hear the Pope say something controversial?
Well, the Pope's remarks received a very strong reaction from Ankara, from Turkish president to Turkish prime minister to Turkish foreign ministry to Turkey's minister in charge of European affairs. Everyone reacted very harshly to the Pope, and they said that the Pope is, invoking religion into political business, and it's not his place to do so. And so then the Pope, the Vatican had responded saying that it was not the Pope's words, but he referred to the academic studies that refer to what happened to the Armenians in 1915 as a genocide. But the Turkish government reacted very harshly to the Pope's remarks.
Tal, the Armenian president says that he wants to normalize relations with Turkey. He's looking for reconciliation. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
We shall, at the end of the day, establish normal relations with Turkey. And establishing those normal relations should be without any preconditions. We have not set any preconditions for the Turks. We have not said that you should recognize the Armenian genocide to establish normal ties. Our position is fair and constructive, but the Turkish side, the Turkish leadership, has always set different kinds of preconditions.
So, Tal, with statements like that, and the Turks, as you pointed out a moment ago, are looking for a partner on the other side, are you hopeful then that this issue can be resolved?
Well, as long as there are such narratives that are anti-Turkish in their very origin, regardless of what Turkey does. This is not just about whether a legal term is going to be recognized or not by Turkey. This is about the advent of an entire narrative that is based on World War I propaganda and is anti-Turkish at its very core. Turkey would like to know, why is this being used against it? It is not just a question of what Turkey does in response to these accusations. It is a question of why do we have these accusations in the first place, and what do they mean? Also, that there are other political issues that are troublesome. Part of this narrative on the Armenian suffering in 1915 conceals, the fact that there has been an Armenian occupation of territory by the name of Nagorno-Karabakh. These are issues that make the Armenian-Turkish conflict a whole lot more complicated than it might appear.
Tülin, there are reportedly something like 100,000 Armenians who currently live in Turkey. What is life like for them in Turkey?
Well, Armenians do live in Turkey, just like other foreigners live in the country. They do work. Some do not have the legal permit for work in the country, but they, regardless of that, they do. It's sometimes unfortunate that their status is also politically abused, but it doesn't change anything in practice. So they're much welcome in the country. They do their work, and they do receive a lot, employment in the country. They mostly, I think, work in the textile industry, and they're, all across the country, but mostly in Istanbul and the Black Sea region.
Tal, time is catching up with us, but I have to ask you about this. The Obama administration has come down firmly on the side of Turkey. Is this, or will it be seen as something of a diplomatic coup for Ankara?
Well, I actually see it as more of a political game that has been playing, before us for decades now. I find that it began during the years of the war in Vietnam. If they had internet in the 1960s, especially after the operation by the name of Rolling Thunder started, you'd Google the term genocide and you'd see references to Vietnam on top of the list. If you look today, you find that that part of history is forgotten, and the term genocide is associated with the Armenian case. To me, that is a major coup to the US government. Turkey is not a raging bull about this issue. Turkey is more like a sitting duck. It has to suffer through accusations about its Ottoman history, and it has to suffer through accusations of its reactions, to accusations of denial, and I don't see a coup there. I see a whole lot more of the same, where the US is gaining by indirect means, controlling institutions that are seemingly international, through its media, through academic publications, to create this buzz that this term is somehow relevant and on the table.